Hello everyone, it's Old Guardian here. Now that all the cards from the upcoming Titans expansion have been revealed, I figured it would be a good time to take a look at some of the most interesting cards in the set. And what do I mean by interesting? I mean cards that promote interesting decisions, or cards that include interesting mechanics, something just a little bit out of the ordinary run-of-the-mill Hearthstone. I'm not including the Titans in this, because the Titan cards themselves are all quite complex and in that sense quite interesting, but what about the non-Titan cards? So I'm going to go through them class by class, the most interesting ones, and well, I'm going through these classes in alphabetical order, and as you can see these are Demon Hunter cards, because Death Knight doesn't have any interesting cards in this set, I guess. I mean, there's the Plague mechanic obviously for Death Knight. How interesting is that? Well, yeah, I mean, I do want to play with them, but they're not particularly decision heavy or intriguing as a mechanic. But what about these cards? So for Demon Hunter, we have Runic Adornment. Discover a spell that costs 3 or less, shuffle 2 copies into a deck that casts when drawn. So you get one card immediately into your hand that you can then use, but then you also have to weigh that together with the copies that are cast when drawn, because when they're cast when drawn, that means that you cannot target them, so they will hit whatever is a valid target, and that makes it a little bit more intriguing on what to pick. And also, like, if you get cast when drawn cards that draw more cards, then you might have problems with your hand size, so some interesting decisions with Runic Adornment. I do like that. Also, I look forward to playing that one with relics, by the way. Relics, you know, there's 2 relics that cost 3 or less, and then we can just cast more relics from our deck, so yeah, that's pretty sweet. Then there's Weight of the World for Demon Hunter. 3 mana, draw 2 cards, forge, draw cards until you have as many in hand as your opponent first. So it's an arcane intellect, but then if you spend 2 mana beforehand in order to forge it, then you might be able to draw a lot more cards. So this could be a pretty huge refill for some very aggressive Demon Hunter deck, especially if you're against a control deck that will have a lot of cards. Then again, control decks might have too many cards, so then you end up drawing those 2 cards after, and then you burn some cards. But then again, if you're playing an aggro deck, burning some cards probably doesn't matter. So another card that makes you make some interesting decisions. I really enjoy the Hunter set that's coming with Titans, and the 2 most interesting cards from the Hunter set. Always a bigger Jormungandr, give a minion +2 attack, and excess damage dealt by attacks hits the enemy hero. So trample mechanic basically from Magic. Yeah, trample, more attack. You can use that with rush minions, you can use that with existing minions. Just a very interesting card, interesting mechanic that we haven't seen much of in Hearthstone. It has appeared before in Hunter, but it's not a very common mechanic. And then the Observer of Myths. After you summon a minion with more attack than this, give all friendly minions +1 attack. So that also buffs the Observer of Myths. So when you summon a minion with, let's say, 2 attack, then this becomes 2/4, and then you need to summon a minion with 3 attack to again give more attack, and then this becomes a 3/4. Then you could summon someone with 4 attack, and this becomes a 4/4. Obviously, it doesn't have to go. I mean, you can summon something with 4 attack immediately and make this a 2/4 with that. But that makes some interesting decisions with pacing and with optimizing just how much attack you can give all of your minions. Oh, lovely, lovely card. The Titans Mage set carries an interesting theme. The theme is spell schools. And Discover of Magic, discover a spell from a spell school that you haven't cast this game from any class. So then you first kind of have to wonder, okay, do I cast stuff like Frost, Fire, Arcane, the traditional Mage spell schools first before I start to discover with this, so that I will get as many spell schools as possible? Just a fun little card with a lot of decision making involved. And then there's the big payoff card for spell schools, the Elemental Inspiration. Maybe not so interesting mechanically, apart from the fact that many people have been very confused about this card. Summon a 4/5 Vortex with a random bonus effect for each spell school you have cast this game. So this text description is a little bit ambiguous, but what this really means, that has been confirmed by the developers, is that for each spell school you have cast this game, you're going to summon 1 4/5 Vortex with 1 keyword. So if you have cast 5 spell schools, you're going to summon 5 4/5 vortices, and each of them will have 1 random keyword. So that's like a Dragon Core Alana. It just fills your board. And you can also discount that with mage tools, so yeah, there's potentially some quite interesting strength here, and some interesting thinking on which spell schools you have played, which spell schools you need, how do you get those cards. I do enjoy that thematically. I enjoy the mage set a lot. Then in the paladin set, we have Astral Serpent, and I mean, this card has got to be totally nuts, right? 4 mana 3/3 dragon. At the end of your turn, if this didn't attack, draw 2 cards. So the turn you play it, it doesn't attack, it can't attack. So it's 4 mana to get a 3/3 minion and 2 cards onto the board. That's pretty sweet. And then on the subsequent turns, like if it ever lived to subsequent turns, then you could choose not to attack to draw more cards. So I do enjoy that. That's something new for Hearthstone. And then these Paladin Resurrect effects, Thirst Tears, 5 mana, resurrect 3 different Paladin minions, set their stats to 2 to Forge, Resurrect another. Well, despite the Forge effect, or Forge effect really, it's just one more, it doesn't really affect the way the card functions. But the way this card functions, I mean, there's the Earthen mechanic now. Earthens come in and then they get bonuses. So yeah, you could do that. But you could also build some kind of Paladin deck based on Divine Shields, for example. Death Rattles. I just think Thirst Tears, resurrecting those minions with limited stats, but it allows you to think a lot about deck. This is more like a deck construction thing for Thirst Tears. How do you build your deck around that so that you will get as much benefit as possible from summoning minions as 2/2s? I think that's a really intriguing card. Then for Priest we have Pogo Hopper, basically. Astral Automaton, 1 mana 1/1 mech, has +1/+1 for each other Astral Automaton you have summoned this game. And oh boy, then you try to make copies of this as much as possible. Any form of making copies is fine, because summon effect means that any way you generate the minion, it's always going to be summoned. For play, you would have to actually play the card from your hand, but summoned is fine, so you can copy them on the board, you can copy them in your hand. Any kind of copying, just a lot of fun. I don't expect this to be very competitive. I hope it's not very competitive. These kinds of decks, like Pogo Hopper decks, for example, when they worked really well, they were quite annoying. But who knows? At least it's something completely different for Priest. And Rogue gets this beauty, Gear Shift. 1 mana. Shuffle the 2 leftmost cards in your hand into your deck, draw 3 cards. So if you play a very aggro Rogue deck that just spends all of its cards, and you play this and you're empty-handed, then there's nothing to shuffle into the deck, so then you will just draw 3 cards for 1 mana. Otherwise you can just work around so that the cards on the leftmost part of your hand are some of the cards that you really don't want there at the moment, and then you can just replace them with cards that are potentially useful. So just a lovely card, a lot of decision making potentially involved, and I like it a lot. Blizzard also still has not given up on trying to make Overload Shaman a thing. Personally, I think Overload mechanic is a failure. It's not very interesting mechanic. I mean, if you have to try to print tons and tons and tons of really super strong cards in order to make your mechanic work, then those cards work despite the mechanic and not because of the mechanic. So then I guess the mechanic itself is not ideal. But oh boy, Thorim Stormlord. Battlecry, unlock your overloaded mana crystals, draw that many cards. Will be very interesting trying to work on how you overload yourself enough to draw a whole bunch with Thorim, but don't overload yourself too much. And whether you play this on the turn when you overload those mana crystals, or whether you play them on the next turn, so your mana crystals are mostly overloaded, you have 3 mana crystals at least available, you play Thorim, and then all of those others are unlocked, which means that then you will be able to do a bunch of stuff with the cards that you draw. So really fascinating card with many intriguing decisions to come. I'm also a huge fan of the Warlock set, because Warlock set is going to enable making big Warlock decks, maybe. Well, we'll see. And Warlock deck, I mean, Chaotic Consumption, 1 mana, destroy a friendly minion to destroy an enemy minion. And this is double targeted. You choose the friendly minion you want to destroy, and then you choose the enemy minion that you want to destroy, which means that that's pretty bonkers. I mean, yeah, potentially usable card. Then Mortal Eradication, deal 5 damage randomly split among all enemy minions, restore 2 health to your hero for each killed. So if you can work a little bit, set up the health on the minions properly, and then do this potentially a lot of healing and a lot of board clears. So really fun looking card. And then Loken, Jailer of Yogg-Saron. Battlecry, discover a minion from your deck, summon a tentacle with its stats, and taunt. And discover a minion from your deck. When it's written like this, that means that you draw that minion. That minion is going to be added to your hand. And then the tentacle is also going to be added on the board. So that means that you don't choose only based on stats, but also based on what you're going to want to do on the following turns. What kind of minion do you want to draw? And that means that there's more interesting decisions with Loken. And the warrior set is intriguing as well. Bellowing Flames, deal 5 damage to a minion, Forge, then deal 5 damage split among all enemy minions. Just such a wonderful looking card for something like Control Warrior. You Forge this on turn 2, okay, because you wouldn't be doing much on turn 2 anyway. And then on turn 3, you can deal 5 damage to a minion and then 5 damage randomly spread. So boom, that's a big board clear that early in the game. Trial by Fire, 7 mana, summon 5/1/1 Valkyrie with Rush. When one dies, give the others +1/+1. So you rush in the first one and all the others become 2/2s. You rush in the second one, if it dies, the others become 3/3s. You rush in another, if it dies, the rest become 4/4s. So depending on how you can kill those Valkyrie off, it depends on how many stats you have available overall. So that's just pretty sweet. And obviously there's Odin Prime Designate. I'm not sure if Odin is really complex. It's not mechanically very complex, it's quite straightforward. Battlecry for the rest of the game. After a hero gains armor, they gain that much attack for that turn. But it is a brand new and completely unique wing addition for Control Warrior, because now you're just going to play some armor gain cards, and once you have gained some armor, oh well, then you're going to have some attack, like up to 30 or 40 attack, and boom, off you go to the races. So yeah, in that sense it's new, even though it's not very complex. It should also be noted that there are some interesting neutral cards in this set. I mean, Watcher of the Sun, just look at that. It's a common card, but it's pretty bonkers, isn't it? 2 mana 2/3, Battlecry get a random Holy Spell. So Holy Spell access to any class, obviously going to be used a lot in Mage, because Mage wants all those spell schools. But then there's also the Forge part, also restore 6 health to your hero. I haven't been very impressed by many Forge cards. It seems that Forge is quite expensive as a mechanic, but forging this can sometimes be a useful effect. I mean, you forge this and it's effectively a 4 mana 2/3 that gives you a Holy Spell and restores 6 health to your hero. I mean, reminds me of the antique Healbot of old, so yeah, pretty intriguing. Also, Careless Mechanist. There's so many cards that reward you for drawing cards, but finally we have a card that rewards you for not drawing cards. 3 mana 4/5, have to draw your second card in a turn, destroy this. Pretty intriguing for some kind of very aggressive decks. That's a lot of stats on turn 3, and boom, off we go to the races. Then a 3 mana card that I have high hopes for, the Ravenous Kraken. We also know that there's going to be a signature version of this, which means that that's probably going to be earnable somehow. Maybe, well, it's a common, so pretty much everyone have access to it anyway. Battlecry, destroy a friendly minion, Death Rattle, summon a copy of it. So you can use this with some Reborn minions, with some Death Rattle minions. It's not a cube, it doesn't summon 2 copies, but you could Yelling Yodeler this after it has eaten something and then summon 2 copies that way and still have one inside the Kraken. So I look forward to playing with that card a lot. Then there's Serenite Tolvir, 4 mana 3/5 taunt. Whenever this is attack, draw a card. If you play this against a token deck, they might just make you draw so many cards that you end up overdrawing a bunch. On the other hand, if you don't have that many cards in your hand, then this can potentially give you a lot of card draw. Opponent will really have to think how they kill this. Do they kill this in single go? Do they kill this with spells? I'm not sure whether ultimately 4 mana 3/5 stats is going to make it, whether that's going to be actually good enough to be played, but it does have some interesting characteristics. And finally, the neutral legendary card, Kologarn, 8 mana, Rush. Whenever this attacks a minion, put it in your hand. Death Rattle, move any in your hand to your opponents. So no damage is dealt anywhere when this attacks a minion. The minion just disappears. It doesn't proc its Death Rattles, no nothing. It just appears in your hand. So this can be a wonderful way to hard remove stuff with no consequences. Obviously, then the opponent has to try to kill Kologarn with its 10 health to get their card back into their hand, or otherwise you just might be able to play that the following turn. So I think this is just such a really intriguing mechanic that Hearthstone hasn't had before, and I like that a lot. So overall, I think there are quite a few interesting cards in the Titans expansion. None for Death Knight or Druid. That doesn't mean that Death Knight and Druid are useless. I mean, some of their cards are pretty strong. They have those Treant synergies, they have the Plague synergies. Well, maybe Plagues are going to be too weak to see play, we'll see. But still, there's Titans, of course. Titans are intriguing. They have lots of abilities. And then a bunch of other cards also in the expansion that I really look forward to playing that can promote some interesting decisions. How many of these are playable? I don't know that. I don't know that, of course, yet, but I look forward to this expansion. I like these mechanics a lot. Thank you for watching. Click like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and a special thanks to all of my Patreon supporters, YouTube members and Twitch subscribers who make all of these videos possible.